My name is Lynette Owens, and I am the Vice President of Global Consumer Education for Trend Micro. I'm also the founder of our Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. And joining me tonight is my colleague, Doug Binns. Doug, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Doug Binns. I am a network security professional and lab administrator at Trend Micro. I work on I manage the labs for our support in our training organization for the Tipping Point division of Trend Micro.
Fantastic. So here we are. And Doug, if I could ask you while I'm going through these first few slides, if you could continue to post the sign-in link as people join, and I'll mention it to people to sign in. So again, if you're just joining us, there's a sign-in link in the chat. Please follow that link. Let us know you're here. That way we can let your school organizers know that you were in attendance this evening. Okay.
Like Marcella already posted it once again.
Yes, and I'm just posting it again. There's the sign-in link in the chat. And if you'd like to listen in Spanish, please select the globe icon and listen in Spanish, and you'll hear our colleague Marcela in Spanish for this evening. So couple of housekeeping items here. First, welcome to everybody. As you can see in the chat, people are dialing in from a number of places, and so we'd like to extend a special welcome to all of the schools here tonight joining us. And we really enjoy doing these events across the country because it's a wonderful way not only to share what we know, but also to learn from you and from each other. And this is a wonderful forum to connect parents from all different parts of the country. This is being offered in Spanish. So again, choose the globe icon if you'd like to listen in Spanish. We do encourage you to, again, use the sign-in link in the chat to let us know you're here. But if you have questions, please don't put them in the chat. We'd prefer for you to use it in the Q&A. Put it in the Q&A because it might get lost as the chat goes by. We do use the chat quite a bit tonight. And finally, this session is in fact being recorded. So if you would like a copy of the recording, if there's somebody at your school community that missed it, you would need to request that from the person at your school who organized tonight's event. We will be providing the link to whomever that point person is, because we make it available only to those schools who have been registered as part of this event. All right. When you exit the Zoom tonight, you'll also be presented with a very, very brief survey. We ask that you try and complete that for us. We'd love your feedback, no matter what it is. So we're going to start. Doug, if you want to take us through these two polls, sure. I'll be happy to drive from here. It's our chance to get to know you a little bit.
First, I want to acknowledge Scott's test question and let him know that I marked it as answered live. So I did see that. Let me find it.
Okay.
Are you going to launch that?
Yes.
Okay.
I will.
We'll start off. We want to know how old your oldest child is. This helps us kind of guide some of the reference material that we have and the discussion that we have as well. So that poll should be up on your screen. We want to know, is your oldest child A, 5 years or older or younger, B, 6 to 10 years old, C, 11 to 14 years old, or D, 15 years or older. Now, I personally have 3 children, 2 of which are in their 20s, 1 of which is 17. So I definitely would be marking D here for myself. But I have experienced, I and my children have experienced the internet and technology at all of these different ages. So I've got a little bit of experience in each of these areas. So go ahead and update your answers.
Fantastic. Let's end the poll here and we'll share the results. Looks like we have a winner. and that's 11 to 14 years old, the majority of you. But we've got people with kids in all of these age brackets, their eldest in all of these age brackets.
Yep. I
All
find
right.
11 to 14 years old to be a very tricky age bracket. They tend to,
Yeah, it is.
students at that age tend to want to listen more to their friends than their parents at times.
Yes.
I bet you there's some head nods going on out there.
And our second question.
So what we also need to know is, what are you most interested in discussing? Again, this helps us guide our discussion and make sure that we're covering the topics that are most important to you. A, managing screen time for your kids. B, helping my kids stick to age-appropriate content. C, dealing with online bullying or hate. D, getting ideas for positive uses of the internet. And E, not quite sure, just here to learn something new.
Yeah, and I apologize. The poll actually wasn't working for this one. So if
Oh, was
people
it not?
no, if they just want to put their answers in the chat, that would be fine for
Okay.
this particular question. So apologies that the poll for this one wasn't working. So let's take a look at your answers in the chat. A, B, C, D, or E.
We're seeing some B's and C's.
Yeah.
I'm thinking A and B seem to be the two top, just from
Yes.
what I'm seeing.
And from our having done many of these over the past 2 years, and even the 12 years prior to the last 2 years, A and B tend to be the most popular answer. But we know that we tend to get questions across all of these. So we are going to touch on every single one of these tonight, but it's good to know where most of you are, where your head is in terms of greatest concern. And I love that someone was creative enough to give answer F, all of the above.
Absolutely.
That we should provide that answer.
We probably should.
Yes. So thanks everyone. So I think, Doug, I'll take this part and then I'll hand it over to you. So, I think it goes without saying that a lot has changed over the last 2 years. But a lot has not changed as well. And, one of the things that did change is our kids using technology, maybe not as much as before the pandemic, but certainly because of the pandemic, internet use was at an all-time high. But what that didn't change was the fact that kids still need our guidance on how to use these tools in the safest, most responsible, and most positive ways, because the risks to them are still very much there. Nothing changed about that. There were some changes which we'll talk about in terms of not necessarily new risks, but risks that sort of increased in size because of the pandemic. But on the flip side of that, the benefits also are still there. And maybe your kids, for the first time, experienced using technology in a remote, setting for school, even if it was temporary. That was obviously very beneficial when you couldn't go in. So hopefully we not only learned some new ways to use technology in the way we should, but also that we might let some of those uses stick around because they were beneficial to us. And that is why teaching our kids how to be good digital citizens is more important than ever. And when we talk about digital citizenship, it actually is comprised of quite a number of things. The first is obviously talking about risk. We do want to talk about what are the risks and how do I avoid them? And what do I do if I ever face them? But we also want to talk about digital literacy. And that means even if I teach my child why privacy is important and that we need to protect it, we then have to teach them, how do I actually do that? Where are the privacy settings? What is two-factor authentication and why is that important for my privacy, and so on. So it's not only important to know what the risks are, but it's also important to know how to use tools to help you stay safe. The third is actually about how we behave in these online spaces. Every online app and game does have terms of use. There are acceptable ways of behaving, and there are unacceptable ways of behaving as well. So it's important that we're talking about those topics as well. And finally, mastery. What we mean by this is that very often when we talk to children about technology use, it's such a long list of what not to do. We have to remember that as part of teaching our kids to be great digital citizens, we should also be encouraging and modeling the ways in which they should be using technology. Again, balance the conversation of what not to do with all the ways in which we should be using technology that can be good for them, their future, for others, or for the world around them. And so we like to organize tonight's talk around 4 specific areas. The first is what it means to be online. Okay. Being online for us as parents and helping our kids be online means that we are setting up the right environment, setting the rules, and setting a great example for them. And while they're online, how do we help them be safe, be kind, and be savvy? With regard to being safe, we will talk about how to protect your privacy, your personal information, and even your physical selves. When it comes to being kind, we'll talk about not only why it's important and how to be kind to others, but also how to think about kindness directed to oneself. Because there are elements of how kids use technology that can be risky in terms of their mental health and wellness in general. So making sure that kindness is not only something we direct outside, but also inside. And finally, teaching our kids to be savvy, which means teaching them good habits as well as encouraging those good uses. What are the ways in which they should be using technology rather than not? So we'll start with setting up the environment. Doug?
All right, well, setting up the environment is pretty straightforward. You want to make sure that you're working in an area that is going to be comfortable. Sometimes quiet is very appropriate when you're working for school or for business. You want to be able to have meetings, have conversations, stay focused, remain focused. You want to have an ergonomic setup. You want to be sitting up straight. You want to have a good chair, good desk, good keyboard. Use ergonomic keyboards and mice. You want to have your monitors positioned well so that you're not creating neck strain. You also one of the things that probably doesn't get talked about enough is also when you're using a handheld device, you want to make sure that you're taking breaks and looking up from your handheld device. We have this habit of looking down at our phones and tablets, so you want to make sure you're doing that. So pay attention to your posture when you're using handhelds as well. On this slide, we talk about the eyes and the lighting. You want to have good lighting, not something that's so dim that's going to strain your eyes. The 30-30-30 rule here that this slide references is, correct me if I'm wrong, Lynette, but I think it's if you're every 30 minutes, you want to look up for at least 30 seconds at something 30 feet away from where you're at. That way you're reducing your eye strain. What I tend to do, because I have dogs, they remind me probably every 30 minutes to an hour to get up and take them outside, and that gives me a good break from sitting in front of my screen. So I use them as a good excuse to get away every now and then as well. That also includes taking the breaks, getting up, moving, not staying stagnant in one place all the time. When I'm at the office, I have some dumbbells on the floor at my desk that I'll use to just kind of get the blood flowing. I get up, walk over to the coffee machine, the water machine, just on a regular basis. So these are just things that you want to kind of build into your routine as you go throughout your day, whether you're working from home, working back in the classrooms, or actually going into an office space. Try to build these routines and make them habits. There's also a mention of blue light glasses. The screens that we use these days, these flat panels, they radiate this blue light that actually overstimulates your brain cells. Blue light will kind of filter that out and actually help reduce the amount of overstimulation that you create. Leads to things like difficulty sleeping, insomnia, and things like that. So we want to try to avoid creating those problems, and get the kids especially into these good habits at an early age so that they practice them throughout their life, because technology is not going away. It's been here for my entire lifetime pretty much, and I foresee it just ever expanding and becoming more ingrained in our day-to-day lives. So talking about the network environment. Now this is where I tend to live and play in my world. You want to limit your access to your devices. When you buy a new device, whether it's a cable modem, a DSL modem, a router, a wireless device, a Ring doorbell, a smart thermostat, all of these things, they all come with a default configuration. Okay. And those default configurations, sometimes it's a password that's printed on the back that's been randomized. Other times it's a default password that's the same on every device that goes out on the market and sits on the shelf. Regardless of which method it is, you want to come up with your own unique password. You also want to come up with a unique password to gain access to your wireless network. Don't leave it as the default. Make it complicated, make it difficult to guess. We'll touch more on that in a few slides. But you would be amazed at how many people still use really simple passwords, even on publicly accessible accounts. Things like 123456789. That's still a commonly used password. The word password is still commonly used. Don't use those. Okay, they're bad. They're really easy to guess. Those are probably both used in the top 5 most commonly used passwords still. When you're setting up the network, you want to separate your fun from your business, your fun from your school. Okay. Most wireless routers, most home network security devices have a way of separating your networks. They allow you to create a guest network and a private network. What we recommend is set up the guest network for all the fun stuff. Your video games, maybe your smart TVs, okay, the stuff where you kind of have open access necessary to do all that fun stuff, all the streaming, all the video game content, all the chats that the kids are doing across their devices. And then you have your business network, your school network that you use, where you keep all your private sensitive information, all your billing statements, your online transactions, your banking access, your business computer, your business VPN, if you have that set up. That'll help separate the threat scape, is what I call it. Because you have all on your guest network, you're going to have a lot more dangerous type of activities going on. When I say dangerous, it's going to be a little more of a threatening environment, and you don't want people to compromise those devices and then use those compromised devices to gain access to your really sensitive personal information, like your emails, your billing statements, your online medical access, stuff like that, and your business computers. The use of Wi-Fi extenders is common practice these days as well. And what you want to do with those is when you get those set up, again, change the default passwords and usernames. Go ahead and connect them to your primary wireless network, but use the extender and make adjustments on them so that they don't extend too far beyond the reach of the walls of your house. If you have like an outside area where you might, like a patio where you might be doing some work or something, and you need to make your wireless network extend out to that space, go ahead and do so, but try to set up the range on those things. Most of them have an adjustable range. Set it up so that you can step off of your patio or step off of your property, and then you'll have no more signal. You don't want to extend that past the reaches of your property. Where to use a Wi-Fi extender is if you have a room, maybe an upstairs or a downstairs areas where the signal is weak, and it just helps extend your wireless network from your primary wireless router to an area where you just don't have good signal quality. Staggering the use time. This is something we practice regularly in my house. It's kind of easy for me to do because I have so much control. But really what you want to do is just set up some basic rules. What time is appropriate for doing business type work? What time is appropriate for playing games and doing entertainment type work, watching TV, streaming movies and videos? What time is it appropriate to shut the device off to go have a family meal? Okay. I think Lynette is one of the advocates of put the phone on the chargers or in a box and lock it away during the family meal. So stagger the times and create a set of rules about what times it's appropriate to do what types of activities. And that'll help you separate your day out as well, so that you're not locked into some activity that where you basically get lost and forget what time it is. I've had it happen to me, believe me. And then, of course, set up times where it's appropriate for people to be streaming, so that you're not overwhelming the bandwidth that's on your network. Some people don't have a whole lot of bandwidth on their home networks, so maybe it's okay for one child to be streaming for an hour, and then you switch and have the other child streaming for an hour while the first child is doing their chores or something. It helps stagger the use of your network as well, so you're not overwhelming things, so you're not getting complaints of jitter and lag from those gamers and whatnot. So security. Wow, I cannot talk enough about this. I don't have time to go into what I would love to talk about, but this is the basics. Use security software on all devices, and every device that you bring into your house has some sort of security settings. If it doesn't, it shouldn't be in your house. Your cell phones, your Ring doorbells, your smart thermostats, your Alexas, and your Google assistants, your video game consoles, your smart TVs, they all have some sort of security settings and software. Find it, learn how to use it, and configure it to what your needs are. Turn on your firewall. Most, if not all, I should say all wireless routers should have some form of a firewall. If it's not sufficient to meet your needs, you can always add another firewall device in between, say, your cable modem and your wireless router. If your wireless router is your cable modem, I would recommend reconsidering that as a network design, because if your cable modem doubles as your wireless network device, then your cable company, your internet service provider, is more than likely responsible for that device. And that leads into some problems that we'll talk about a little bit later on about how to update that. But I always recommend separating that demarcation point that the ISP owns from your internal network components. So get a firewall in there, make sure it separates the ISP's equipment from your own internal equipment. Using strong passwords, I touched on that a little bit. I think we talked more about that a little deeper. Always use strong password, vary your passwords, use multi-factor authentication. I can't tell you how many times a day I have to use my cell phone to log into some service or some site or some tool on my corporate or personal network, because I've got multi-factor and two-factor authentication set up everywhere. I have to type in an extra code every 20 minutes, it seems. It seems annoying, but it really does help protect your stuff. Use of a virtual private network. This is a tool that can be used to connect your endpoint to a known safe endpoint. Um, it's commonly used when you want to connect to the office at work. Sometimes it might be used to connect to a school network. Usually that's going to be used more in higher education, high school and college. If you've got kids at home that are using school provided devices to do their homework in school, there may be a VPN built into that already as well to allow them access to the school resources as well. Um, Virtual private networks can be hardware devices. They can be software uh, components installed on your computer. There is a type of VPN that allows you to remotely connect to a VPN service. And what that can do is it kind of masks your personal IP address and your internet service provider. So what you're doing is you're connecting to a VPN service and then reaching out to the internet from that point. So when somebody tries to backtrace your connection, they'll see that you're coming from that VPN service, and they won't necessarily be able to get all the way back to your personal network. So those are all some options there. I mentioned updating already. I touched on it, and this is super critical. You need to do this with all your devices all the time. Okay. The first thing that you want to do when you put a new device in your house, run the updates, find the latest software package for that device and update it. I recommend doing this at least once a month for all of your devices. If it has an auto update feature, go ahead and enable it. It saves you time and trouble of having to go through and do this. Gives you a little bit of peace of mind that it's kind of being done in the background too. Microsoft tends to release updates. I think it's every second Tuesday of every month, the major updates. Sometimes they do out of band updates, but again, go into your Windows settings and make sure you're doing regular updates to your Windows operating systems. If you have Chromebooks, if you have Macintosh devices, there's updates available for them too. I can't tell you how frequently they send out updates, but look for them on a regular basis. Maybe put a calendar reminder just one day a month, go through and make sure all your stuff is updated, kind of like checking your smoke detectors. You want to make sure everything's safe online as well. The passwords, cannot stress this enough. Change them regularly, make them complicated. Don't use personal information to create your passwords. Don't use birthdays, don't use simple anniversaries, don't use dates of any kind. They're too easy to find, they're too easy to guess. Don't use names of pets or anybody in your family. Make them as complicated as you can. Random strings of characters. Here's a suggestion on this slide. Take the first letter of each word in a sentence. In this case, might need to buy more toilet paper soon. Here we were able to include the number 2 and the exclamation point at the end. So you have a character and a number included. We varied the case of the letters. So it's a fairly complicated password. It's not going to be easy to guess. And I tell you, the hackers, the cyber criminals that are out there, they go for the low hanging fruit. If they can guess it, they'll use it. They have computers that will sit here and churn through all sorts of different possibilities of passwords. So you want to make sure that you're using complicated passwords. Minimum of 8 characters long. I recommend 12. And don't use anything that you might consider simple or easy to guess. Like I said, a series of numbers, easy to guess. The word password, easy to guess. I think the most resounding thing that I saw was 10 years ago, the LinkedIn hack. The number 2 password that was in their database for users was the word LinkedIn. I mean, it was just amazing how easy passwords can be to guess if you don't vary them. I recommend also updating them at least once every 3 months on every service, every website, every tool that you use. If that sounds complicated, grab yourself a password manager tool. Our company provides one for free on our website. There's probably dozens more out there for free as well. Uh, Password managers allow you to keep track of all the different websites you visit and all the usernames and passwords that are associated with that. Some of them give you reminders to um, reset your passwords on a regular basis. Some of them will auto-generate random character passwords for you as well. So it makes it a little easier to randomize it. Then you never have to memorize anything. Just make sure that you back up that password manager database so that you have it in case of a hard drive crash or something. And that leads us to backing up and storing safely. Use offline backups. Get yourself a good USB hard drive that has some good backup software so that you can plug it into your computer, let it run, I don't know, while you're sitting at the dinner table for an hour, and it'll back up all your important files. You unplug that, you put it away in a safe place, a fire safe maybe in your house if you have one. You could use online backup services as well. I think some of the services, I mean, Google, you could use like Google Drive and Amazon Drive. There's a handful of others, Carbonite. There's a lot of really good pay for services that'll allow you to back up and image your entire computer to the cloud and store it safely in an encrypted fashion. Those types of services are really useful in the event of a full hard drive crash or computer crash or something more catastrophic like a house fire. Okay. Um, by storing it offline and off-site, you're protecting all of your information from loss. Now, you want to make sure you're using a reputable company as well, because you also want to protect your information from potential compromise as well.
And I would just jump in here to say that, it might not be anything you do that causes you to potentially lose any of that data. It could be something that your kids do. They were surfing on a site that maybe isn't so reputable, and all of a sudden, unbeknownst to you, they've introduced some kind of malicious software into the home. So you want to do these things because your kids will be learning sometimes some of those little screens, and you tap something you thought you were tapping and it wasn't what you thought you were doing, and now you're in trouble. So these are all really important things to remember.
Absolutely. And I can't tell you how many times in my career, my 3-decade career, that I have lost something that was really important because I didn't follow proper backup and storage procedures. And I know better. So it's going to happen. Expect it to happen. Do your best to protect yourself just by taking some simple steps. These days, offline storage media, a little USB hard drive, they're not terribly expensive. The online backup services over time can become expensive, but you really have to gauge what the value of your data is, and go from there. Let's see, where are we at? Tech tools.
Yeah.
There are so many different tools, software devices, hardware devices. We just cannot cover them all. But in general, they all kind of have the same components, the same settings, and the same protections that are available in some form or another. And of course, you're going to have to go look at your manufacturer's devices, their configurations, their help files, their documents, their online websites, etc., on how to configure all these things. But when you get into the details of these things, you're going to find settings for what you see on the screen: age-appropriate content, in-app purchases, time monitoring and time restrictions, and in some cases, it'll let you get really granular with these settings. In some cases, it'll be general and broad. And in other cases, you can set different profiles for a device so that one user has a completely different set of configurations than another user. The routers that sit between your ISP and the rest of your network will typically have a lot of these settings built into their firewall settings. The devices like your TVs and your game consoles, they'll have their own menu systems about how to set up age appropriate access, privacy settings, things like that. Your ISPs typically offer a plethora of tools. They'll offer you downloadable firewall software for your computers. Sometimes they will have built into the devices that they provide for your home. They'll have tools like the Disney Circle features, which is a parental control app. You can get third-party security software. I'm a little partial to our own products, but we at Trend Micro also believe that our competitors are not necessarily the people selling security products. Our competitors are the people that we are fighting are the bad guys. So if you don't use us, use somebody. That's fine. App stores. Look at the app store settings. Some of those app store settings on the cell phones and the tablets that you hand your little ones. You want to be able to put in passcodes to download new stuff. Maybe set the settings in there to age appropriate content, what can be downloaded, what cannot be accessed, etc. Same thing with the sites and the apps. You can get all sorts of browser plugins these days to also help with some of this kind of stuff. All the apps that you download, your TikToks, your Instagrams, these settings are all there. You just got to kind of go look for them. If you have trouble finding them, there's plenty of resources online. I know on our website, that our internet safety website, we have some links to some of those types of resources and some walkthrough guides as well for some of the more popular apps and tools.
Absolutely. So, Doug, what I think we can do here for the audience today, because I know many people said in the poll that they were most interested in things such as most concerned about things like age appropriate content being presented to their kids, and also around managing time. So I think in the interest of time, what we want to show you all is that there's quite a number of these tech tools that are already available to you simply because your kids are using these apps and these devices.
Yep.
So we're going to go quickly through some of these. If there's interest in any of these for us to talk about any one of these, please put it in the Q&A and let us know that you've got a question about any one of these devices or apps. The first is iOS screen time. So I'd love to see in the chat, how many of you have kids using Apple devices? Just put it in the chat. Are you an Apple family? Yes, no, maybe. Yep. We usually get quite a few, Doug. There's quite a few out there. Great. Okay. So the setting that's most important to know about here is, Doug, it's called screen time.
Yes. Now, unfortunately, I am not an iOS user. I do not use a lot of Apple products. So I have limited exposure to this, but the general gist of iOS screen time is that it does allow you to configure your device to do kind of what it says on this screen right here. It allows you to define limits of when and what you're accessing. It reminds you how long you've been on your device. I believe iOS screen time has a dimming feature as well when at a certain time. Is that correct, Lynette?
Yes, you can. You can definitely. I use that certain hours of the day, where it goes to dark mode.
Yep.
Yes. Yep.
And it also, of course, it allows you to adjust the content and privacy restrictions.
Yep.
Now, screen time also has a family component too that can manage multiple devices. Is that correct?
Yes. So basically sure, absolutely. And so for those there may be, go ahead, tell us in the chat if you're already actually using this with your kids, but just very simply for those of you who use Apple, whose kids use Apple and aren't aware of iOS screen time, you can find a lot of great information from Apple about it. But basically you've got to set them up under your iTunes account, set them up with their own iTunes account. Even if they're under 13, you can set up an iTunes account for your children. You see an example here, which is my phone with my two kids here. And even though they're teenagers already, but we still use it. And you set them under yours, and you're able to see a lot of things, such as how long they've been using YouTube. How much time do I want them to be limited on Instagram? And so on. The best thing about all of these tools, by the way, that we're going to talk about is, to me, the most important thing about these tools is not the tools themselves. What we recommend that you do as parents is to use these tools to support ongoing conversations with your children. So, for example, if you have one of your kids who seems to be, maybe they're kind of struggling in a class, and you also notice that they have their phone in their room and they're listening to music, or maybe they're doing something else. So if you're noticing that while they should be doing homework, you see that in their screen time that they seem to be also on Instagram at the same time, that's a trigger for you to have a conversation about whether or not having the phone anywhere close to them while they're having homework, while they're doing homework, if they happen to be struggling in that particular class, maybe it's not the greatest idea in those moments. And so that's our biggest takeaway with these tools, is use it as fuel to have those ongoing conversations with your kids.
One other thing that I can also recommend, I'm an Android family, and my kids have Android phones. We use the digital well-being features. We started recently using them kind of in a contest to see who can use their phone the least in a day and a week. So we by using those features, it kind of tracks how much time we're on each of our apps and each of our devices. Another thing that my 17-year-old realized kind of on his own is that screen time on his cell phone was impacting his grades in school. And now he's made the very adult decision to leave his cell phone at home when he goes to school in the morning and only use it when he's at home. I don't think I could even do that. So he's
Good
taken
for
a pretty
him.
big
Very
leap
good.
there.
Yeah. That's great, though. That's great self-restraint and self-awareness, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
So similarly, Google launched a tool for how many Android families out there? How many of you? Tell us in the chat. How many of you have kids using the Android devices? It's always fun to see the balance between Apple and Android. And we have people who say, I refuse to use the other. It's very funny. Okay, so we know that there's some Android families out there, and this is actually an app that Google launched 4 years ago, even before the pandemic, called Google Family Link. And you can basically do a lot of the same things that we just described with iOS screen time. So, if you're not familiar with it already, both of these are free. So, consider using this as a way to monitor what they're doing, limit their screen time. You can, filter apps by their age limits and so on. Anybody's kids watch YouTube videos? Let us know in the chat. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So my bet is, because of the age range, 6 to 15, we've probably got quite a large volume of
Oh, yeah. Even
folks
younger
using.
than 6, right? Even younger and
Yep.
older. So YouTube actually late last year launched what's called the supervised account. And if you're not familiar with it, just do a search on Google about the YouTube supervised account, because what it lets you do is it takes the fear out of letting your kid on YouTube and not knowing what video might show up next after they've just watched the one that you said okay to. So you have 3 settings: explore, explore more, or most of YouTube, that are basically set. It's basically limiting the kinds of videos they'll be able to see based on age ranges. So explore is for up to about 10 years old. Explore more gets you up to about 14. and most of YouTube gets you to about 17, but it stops short of adult content. So not until they're 18 would you maybe want to remove this setting. But anyway, for those of you who worried about, I saw some UGs out there about YouTube, consider using the supervised account. You just need a Google account, and you can obviously use that on any kind of device. That's all you need to do, is to set it. I like to ask this question. How many of you allow your kids to use TikTok? Usually we get an opposite answer here. A lots of no's, no ways, not yet. And then we get the occasional, yeah, it's fun, of course, right? It depends on how old your kid is. And
we see our
not,
we see our handful of TikTok videos in our house, but we don't produce any TikTok videos
Sure.
in our house.
You just go around doing the dances, right?
Not at all.
So, of course, and yes, that's a very, very common answer that we get in our sessions is no and no way. There will be a day where you're probably going to say yes. And this is just a setting that you should be aware of. In the moment that you finally say yes, it's a wonderful way to ease you and them into the TikTok experience, and it's called TikTok family pairing. So it's found in their settings called digital well-being. You select family pairing. You actually have to download TikTok on both your own device, which would be the device used to set up the controls, and then TikTok on your child's device, where they would be just using it for fun. And once you've designated the device as parent, you can see here the kinds of settings that you can use to limit how much time they're on it, who can message them, and even the kinds of content they're going to see. So think about that when they continue to bug you. Can I please, 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 please get TikTok? And you finally say, okay, but we're going to start off slow. And TikTok family pairing is a great way to do that. Anybody's kids, I'm going to guess the answer is no here, given that not many of you said yes to TikTok. Anybody's kids using Instagram or begging you for Instagram? There might be a mix here, actually. There might be a mix. Okay, we still have a lot of no's on this too. Again,
it amazes me, Lynette, every time that I see so many no's about these apps. How are these companies still in business if nobody's using them?
I guess there's enough people in the world. There's enough people in the world. And, again, you're all saying no, but there will be a point at which you're probably going to say yes. And this is another just launched this year called Family Center and Supervision. Very similar. I wish they had launched this when my kids started using it several years ago. But again, you can monitor a lot of things. It's wonderful. It's really good for those of you who say yes for the first time to set it up, and you can see how much time they're spending on it. You can also see who they're following, who's following them. You can't control that from here. You can't unfollow people for them. Again, this gives you ammunition to have the conversations that you want to have about, hey, you should be careful who you're following because it reflects on you and the kind of person you are. If I can see that, other people can see that too. So be careful of who you're following and who you allow to follow you, not just what you're posting or saying on these apps. Doug, I don't know if you want to take Roblox, but it's just a quick video we want to show here.
Yeah, so Roblox kind of started off in the early days as somewhat of a game, but it's more of a gaming engineering design platform now, where people can create games and chat and have online discussions. And like most of these other tools and apps that you've seen, all these companies are getting a lot of public pressure to add all of these types of features, to allow for better security, better control of your personal and private information, better visibility for the guardians and parents of children, to see what's going on in their children's lives. So as time goes on, you're going to see more and more and more of these types of controls. And this video here is just demonstrating in the Roblox app, how to go about setting some security settings. And what the discussion here really needs to be is not specifically how to set up this particular app. Know that the settings are there, and this is a great little demo video. But when you go back to your household after our presentation tonight, remember that every app, every tool, every system, every console, every device is going to have similar types of settings available. Okay. And one of the things that we always recommend in our presentations is don't just grab your kid's device and go and set it up. Explore with your child some of these settings, because you want to have the conversation about what the settings are for, why they're important, what they're sharing, and we're going to touch a lot more on this a little bit later in the presentation too. But you want to be able to have an understanding, a mutual understanding of what all those settings do, where they're at, how to set them, and what their purpose is. Without your children understanding their purpose and without you understanding their purpose, they may not be used effectively. So take the time to go through that. And when you bring a new device or install a new app or get a new console, sit down and make it kind of a game, have that conversation. Let's go find those privacy settings. Let's go find those security settings. Make it a process that they get in the habit of doing now, so that 10 years from now, when they have their own new piece of technology, it'll just be built in. Let's go reset those passwords. Let's go set the security settings. They'll go look for that stuff. We growing up with the internet developing around us, we didn't have the opportunity to learn these things. As they developed, we had to come up with these ideas as we grew and learned, and the internet grew up around us. So.
And I would just encourage you, for the interest of time, we're going to just go past these next few apps, because we do want to get to the rest of the presentation. But
Yeah.
I encourage you to put in the Q&A any questions you have specifically about Instagram, about TikTok, about Roblox. Discord is another one that you may have heard of. We won't talk about it here tonight, but any questions that come up, please put them in the Q&A. Xbox, Nintendo, and so on. Okay.
There is a question about kids chat apps. Let me think about that for a minute.
Sure. Yep.
Before I answer that, I just want to acknowledge that question's there. I'll get back to that here in a minute.
Okay, no worries. In terms of setting the rules, I think we just want to say that, as good rules are ones that are considerate of all of these things. What are they allowed to use? When are they allowed to use it? For how long? Where and with whom? Think about all of these things as you're thinking about the rules you're setting around technology use. But I would love to see in the chat, what rules have you put in place in your home that you feel work really well for your family? And if anyone's willing to share, what rules have you tried that didn't necessarily work out so great? So in our house, I have 2 teens, but we started this process since they had devices at the age of 10. Even now, at the ages of 18 and 15, they plug their phones in this common area in the kitchen before they go to bed. It's not in the room, because they know by now how much it can impact their sleep, quality of sleep, and so on. So, and as Doug said before, we don't have phones at the dinner table. It's during the pandemic, we got to sit down and have dinner far more than we ever did prior to that. And I really cherish that. And knowing that they're growing up and leaving soon, that we really need to keep that time precious, because it's few and far between the moments when we're all together and can have quality conversations. So thank you for sharing in the chat your family rules. Self-limiting screen time was not great. Yeah. Yeah, it's good to give it a try and see what they do. Like, you tell me, do you think you've been on that long enough? No.
We tried, when it came to self-limiting, we tried the opposite. We tried having the kids regulate the parents, point
Oh,
out
wow.
when the
That's
parents spend too much time, and that keeps them conscious of how much time people are on the devices as well, including themselves. They may not be great at self-regulating, but they'll tell you when you've been on it too much.
that's great. And I see some people have talked about doing a cell phone contract. That's not a bad idea at all. One thing we do recommend, if you can, if you haven't thought about, new rules every time they get a new device or a new game or app, um, have your kids come up with some of the rules with you, because they're more apt to stick to rules they help to build. And that includes the consequences, by the way. It's very, sometimes we as parents slip and we don't stick to enforcing the rules that we set. So it's really important to follow through with that. Thanks for sharing your rules as a family. And a lot of you talked about screen time. So we just like for you to think about screen time in a different way. This actually comes from the Digital Wellness Lab, who are from it's a collaboration of pediatricians, actually, from Children's Hospital Boston, Harvard Medical School. And, they're really trying to flip the script about screen time to say, maybe it's not so much about the amount of time, but what it is we're doing with those screens, quality. So thinking with your children and having conversations about the fact there's only 24 hours in a day. And in those 24 hours, you need to be doing a lot of things that are really good for you. So have them write this down or discuss with you. How many hours did I spend doing things that are good for my physical health, like sleep, exercise, riding my bike, playing a sport, having meals? How many hours on top of that did I spend supporting myself as a learner? How many hours in school, doing homework, maybe practicing an instrument or other kind of hobby or skill? On top of that, how many hours am I spending in a day doing things that support relationships that are important to me with family or friends or neighbors? And when you add all of that time up, hopefully you're doing a lot of those things. That's a good amount of time in a day. So there might be a little time left over. And if there is, that's okay. Some of that could be dedicated to screens for fun, because you've done all of these other things that are really good for you already. It does not mean, though, that if there are 4 hours in that orange box, that they should be spending it all on an Xbox. No, that's where the rules and the tools that we talked about come into play with regard to screen time with that time left over. But remember that even in the green, blue, and pink boxes, some of that actually is screen time. Schoolwork is very often done with screens, and you might actually be using FaceTime to connect with grandparents who are far away. So that's why, thinking about screen time, we really need to be thinking about quality of what we're doing as much as we are thinking about quantity. Okay. I think we'll close this section with the example that you set. So in the chat, tell us, what rules do you have for yourself? And what kind of example do you think your children think that you set for them? Doug, I love your example of, or your suggestion that kids should be the ones to make the rules for us. It would be very interesting, because I think they think I'm a hypocrite at times.
I think they all do.
Probably. Yeah. Yes. So any
Yeah,
rules do you have yourselves? Put it in the chat. Any
yeah,
rules?
it's interesting to discover um, what your kids think about your use of technology and how frequently you're on it. It can be an eye opener, um, but by them kind of tracking what you're doing, it keeps that thought in the forefront of their mind a little bit, makes them a little more cognizant of what they're doing, and you can also turn it back around on them when they're calling you out on overuse. So
Yes. I will let you take this part, Doug.
privacy. Oh, well, it's kind of what the focus of my life is. So in the world of privacy settings, everything that you have has some sort of a privacy setting to it. From your Fortnite video games to your console video games, to every app that you use, to every website and social media service that you use, somewhere in there, they're tracking your data, your information, your posts, your searches, your personal information, your name, your phone number, your address. And what you want to do is you want to go through and you want to find all of these privacy settings, um, so that you can limit what's exposed. Now, we talk it when we go into schools and we talk to the kids about all of these different apps that they love to use. We ask them the question, why is it free? Why is Instagram? Why is TikTok? Why is Facebook? Why are these things all free? Well, the reason that they're free is because they're not free. You're actually agreeing when you click this accept button to install and use their product, their app, their service. You're agreeing to allow them to use your personal information whenever, wherever, and however, and forever they see fit. Okay. And it's all built into the legalese and in all of these agreements that you accept. But because you're giving them so much power over your personal information, you need to understand how to limit that power by going in and finding these privacy settings in all of these apps and these devices. So this is where we would tend to talk to the kids a lot about what they're sharing and how they're sharing it. But you need to understand that when you click that accept button, you are really accepting um, the terms that they're going to be able to use your information um, where they feel it's appropriate for their business needs. Okay. There's a lot of apps out there that advertise. I think it's it's not Instagram. It's the other one, the
Snapchat.
Snapchat. I think is the uh, instant one where it's supposed to go away after a short period of time, right?
That's correct. Yep.
My kids don't use that anymore. They tried it. They didn't really like it, but um, that data that they post, that quick picture that they took of whatever they were doing at that time and sent to all of their friends and followers, um, it might go to their friends and their friends might see it and then it might be gone off their friends' phones temporarily or shortly thereafter. But that information, that photo, whatever they shared, still exists on the Snapchat servers, which means that a Snapchat employee has access to it somehow, some way, somewhere. Okay. And when their friend receives it on their receiving device, their cell phone, their tablet, it's not very hard to click two buttons and take a screenshot of whatever that was and then reshare it somewhere else. So you got to be careful about what's being shared, um, because even if it's not received on the other end, even if it's a post that you post and then retract, the company that you signed this agreement with, and it's basically signing an agreement, you're still agreeing that they can use that information, that post, that personal data. And normally it comes on this slide we have whenever, however, forever. But you got to assume that nothing's private out there. So um, it's almost a scary concept, but it's the world we live in. So that's where you need to have the conversations with your kids about what they're sharing, um, how they're sharing it. Okay. You don't want them to send a post out to all their Facebook friends saying, hey, we're going to Disney World next week. The whole family's going. Well, that advertises to a cyber criminal or even a real world criminal, that the house is going to be empty. So let's go case the place, right? You got to educate them to post those things after the fact. Hey, we went to Disney World last week. It was great. And then post all the pictures with it. So you got to be careful about what you're saying, what they're saying online. You want to be careful about what we're searching online and what the results look like. Okay. Think things through. Make sure that it's not fake information coming from an irreputable source. You got to make sure that you're looking at reputable news organizations. Sometimes you may not agree with what those news organizations say, but check your facts, check your sources, check it with multiple sources, and make sure it's a legitimate piece of information when you discover it online, or when it comes to you in an email or a text or a message. Watch for scams, watch for things that are too good to be true. These are the same conversations that you have with kids in the real world. Somebody comes up to you offering you a piece of candy, you tell them don't accept it, because there may be some other attachment that goes along with that. A lot of times when you click on these ads or these links that offer something, the first thing they're going to ask you for is personal information. Then you got to start thinking, well, what am I sharing? Who am I sharing with? Who's actually at the other end of this link collecting that information? Is this legit? Is this something that came to me that where I was where they're trying to get my information, or is this something that I sought out? So take those things into consideration when you're looking at all this stuff online. I think this is a survey question, is it not?
This is our last poll that we're going to launch here. So if you want to read through the answers and then I'll launch the
Okay.
poll, that'd be great.
Okay, so this is, any of your kids have their own cell phones? My bet is, based on the age groups that we had, they probably do, a bunch of them, but the first one is yes, of course. B is no. C is not yet, but soon. And D, not for a few more years.
Yeah. Well, basically B, C, and D are all the same answer, which is no.
Yeah.
But you might be at a different stage of life right now with your kids. So it's good to
I know there
know.
have been stages in my kids' lives where, yes, they had the cell phone, and then no, they didn't have the cell phone.
And
So,
then yes again after that, right?
exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Circumstances will dictate sometimes.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we're going to end the poll here and share the answers. There is a winner if you add B, C, and D together.
Oh yeah. Well, D is not for a few more years, and that's clearly the front runner here.
Yes.
Yep. So it does look like we have a handful, a good group that do have cell phones, and a good group that are being a little more conservative with that decision, it sounds like.
Absolutely. So there's one thing I absolutely. So there are a couple things about the camera that we, sorry, about the phone that we want to discuss with you, especially since many of you said not yet. Obviously, at some point, the answer will be yes. Your children will have phones at some point. So this is a good time, even for those of you who already have given a phone to your kids, to have this conversation if you haven't already. And it's specific to one feature of that phone that kids love the most, and that's the camera. So two things. Number one, if you're not already aware, by default, when you get a phone, location services are actually on for the camera. Okay. That means that every time you take a picture and let's say you post it up on Facebook or anywhere, there is what's called metadata attached to every photo. That data includes not only the time and date that you took the picture, even the type of phone or camera in the phone, that kind of information. It also includes location. the actual latitude and longitude on this earth of where that photo was taken. So if a child is taking pictures of themselves in their bedroom, saying, with selfies, and then posting that up on social media, someone could easily do a search online to figure out exactly where you live. So if you don't like that concept, go into your phones now, go into your kids' phones, your own phones, turn off location services for the camera, because all of those pictures you've been posting on Facebook probably have this data attached to it. Now, there's another thing about the camera that we want to make you aware of. And I mentioned earlier that there were risks to kids online, but that during the pandemic, some of those risks became exacerbated. Okay. You should have fun with the camera. You can do lots of fun things when the kids love it. Kids love using the camera on their phones. But I will just say that you please have the conversation with your children that they should never feel pressured to take a picture of themselves that they think is private, very, very private, between them and one other person who likes them, and they want this as a proof that they like them, and so on. They should never feel pressured by anyone, whether it's a peer or a stranger, certainly, to take those kinds of pictures, because even if they never share it, just the act of taking the picture alone can put them at risk, especially if you're backing things up automatically to iCloud or Google Cloud. Already there's going to be another copy of it out there. They should never feel pressured to take one of those types of pictures. Unfortunately, during the course of the pandemic, we do work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who has documented a massive increase in self-produced images and videos like this of underage kids. Okay. And so we really just can't stress enough why it's so important that you have this conversation with your kids. And because, the creation, possession, and distribution of that kind of material is technically a felony. They're not necessarily, law enforcement is not going to prosecute children the way they would if it was adults involved in this. But, you're putting yourself at a lot of risk about having that kind of photo out there about you as a child, because it could end up in the hands of someone who is quite malintended, who could use it for extortion and many other nefarious purposes. Finally, I'd like to share the story of a father who asked me probably 10 years ago now. It was in an audience of, several hundred parents. And he said, my son's a really good kid, but, the phone is in my name. I pay the bill. So what happens if somebody sends him one of those pictures? I mean, again, the bill is in my name and not his. What should I do? And so this is the other part of the conversation to have with your kids, is if they ever receive an image that is disturbing, make sure the door is open for communication, that they can come to you and tell you about it. If it's specifically something of, a peer, underage peer, that's a really inappropriate photo that's being sent to them, they need to come tell you, and then it needs to be deleted. Okay. And then your job as a parent is to also take action, which is, if you know the parents of the child who sent it, maybe you can have that conversation with them and let them know. If that's not comfortable, which often it's not, you might want to report it to the school or even local law enforcement, because you have no idea where else that might have gone. And if there's an investigation, which many times there is, they're going to know that it went to your son, to you, because it's under your name, right? They're going to know. So it's important not to sit on it and do nothing. Take action and don't possess it for any longer than necessary. Certainly don't forward it on to anybody else. Okay. With regard to gaming, I think just very simply what we want to say here is, Make sure you're putting the settings on where kids are, if they're playing on a game where they can play with others, you use those settings that make sure that maybe you only want them playing with kids they know or have met in school, not complete strangers yet. Make sure you become familiar with those settings. Anybody have kids who struggle to stop playing the game even after you tell them 10 minutes is up? You got 10 more minutes, time's up. Anyone have kids like that who struggle to stop? Always, of course, right? We have lots of them. So, my only recommendation here is you can use some of the tools that we talked about, or consider games that are timed. There are games that can go on and on and on. Minecraft is a wonderful place, but it can go on and on and on. Fortnite, what's nice about Fortnite Battle Royale is, last person standing and the game is over. So there is an end to it, but it could go on and on and on. But the sports games like FIFA and NBA 2K and even Rocket League, maybe some of you are familiar with Rocket League. These are games that just have times and they time out and then it's over. So consider thinking about different kinds of games, especially if it's problematic for you in your home. Doug, do you want me to take it from here, or do you?
Either way.
Okay.
I was trying to formulate some answers to some of the questions
Okay.
regarding
Yeah, no
Discord
worries.
and chat apps.
Okay.
It's so deep and involved. I'm trying to summarize my answer because I
Sure.
can go on forever about
All
this.
right. Why don't I go through the content and then we'll address some of the questions here. So we're just going to try and wrap this up here now. So with regard to kindness, I think, all we want to do, the one thing we want to point out here is that, yes, it's important to be nice to other people, to say nice things, to not do mean things to others online. But kindness is not just about doing nice things. It's also about these moments of just reminding our children and each other to respect things like their privacy. If you've ever had that moment where you looked on Facebook and all of a sudden someone had posted all these pictures of you and your kids unbeknownst to you, sometimes that can be annoying. It's important that at a young age that we tell our children, look, before you post something, you might want to ask your friend if they're okay with you posting this. I think if we all did this, we might be in a better place. But we really have to understand, respect each other's privacy. Don't assume that everybody loves to have their photos posted up online. It does end up becoming a source of drama in middle school when all the kids start getting their phones for the first time, taking lots of group selfies. They start to post it on Instagram, and one person is really upset because they don't like how they look in it, but everybody else looks fine. You'd be surprised at how much conflict can start just from simple things like that. So let's talk to our kids about respecting things like privacy, and also the fact that not everyone's going to get a phone at the same time. Not everyone's going to get to use Instagram and TikTok at the same time. So especially for those of you with kids in that 10, 11, 12, 13 range, this is the most awkward time because you're going to see a bunch of kids who have the phone and a bunch who do not. We can all help by encouraging our children to be inclusive of others who might not have a phone yet, while everyone else is group texting each other. Kids feel really left out when that's going on. So let's make sure that if our kids have the phone and we see others that don't, encourage our kids to be inclusive. And if you're a family who chose not to give the phone yet, while everyone else does, be more forthcoming as a parent to say, my kid's not going to get a phone yet. So can you make sure that yours, lets them know about some, sleepover or some other gathering that's happening so they don't feel left out. And again, kindness is something we need to help our children steer inward, because especially on things like social media, kids really get wrapped up equating their own value to the number of likes, followers, comments, and so on that they're getting on social media. We all know how that feels when we post something on Facebook and everybody likes it, right? It's very self-affirming. It makes you feel good. Well, kids sort of start to seek that out. And when they're not getting it, it can make them feel really bad. So it's our job as parents to remind them that they are worth much more than the sum of their likes, their followers, their retweets, and so on. And we as parents can nurture kindness. If something does happen online that's troublesome, that really makes them upset, just make sure the door is open again to support them. And be prepared. Ask yourself, what would I do if someone did cyberbully my kid online? Or what would I do if my kid was the one who actually bullied someone else? Think about those questions. You may never need to use the answers, but don't be shocked. Be prepared. And if you ever see people being really kind and doing good things online, share those stories with your kids so they know that it's not all hate and vitriol on the internet. I think we're just going to wrap it up here with two tips on being savvy. The first is, Doug, you were mentioning this earlier. It's hard to tell what we can trust anymore online or not.
Yep.
So we're really big proponents of encouraging media literacy skills among kids and ourselves, which is why we have partnered with the National Association for Media Literacy Education to create this parent's guide on how to talk to your kids, how to teach them to pause and ask questions and figure out, is this video I just saw real? And how do I start to dissect it? Because if any kind of headline or post draws a strong emotion from them, that's a flag. That's a red flag that you should really pause and make sure that's not, it could be clickbait, it could be something worse.
Mm-hmm. You said the word clickbait, and I have to throw this out there. I don't. It's not even part of our presentation, but I got to throw this out there. QR codes. You see them everywhere. I gotta discuss this, and we need to add this to the presentation somewhere. Make sure that you have on your phone, if you use QR codes, whether you go to the restaurant to pull up their menu or whatever, if you're using QR codes, use some sort of an app, a security app that will check the destination of that QR code before it takes you to it. It's really easy to set up a fake site that will automatically download something to your phone or your device just by scanning a QR code. Be cautious of them. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, well, and Trend Micro actually has a free QR scanner that you could use.
I didn't want to plug us, but we do.
Well, there's not many out there. So, we have a lot of free tools. We might as well, let people know that they exist.
Yeah.
So, Doug, have you ever looked yourself up online?
I'm out there. I'm not very extravagant. I'm pretty simple. You'll find me on LinkedIn. You might find some mentions of me on Facebook, but not much.
Right.
I'm pretty good about keeping things private.
All right. Well, we encourage you all, if you actually tell us in the chat, have you ever looked yourself up online? And if you did, what did you find? What did you find? The reason that we encourage this is because you might actually find your cyber twin, someone who shares your name, but actually isn't you. You might find something out there in public that you didn't realize was public. So if you haven't done it before, we recommend you do it. We also recommend you do it for your kids. Actually, when I've been in classrooms, a lot of kids raise their hand because they have looked themselves up. You don't have to go looking. You can set up a Google alert, just go to google.com/alerts and enter whatever name or phrase you want to be alerted on whenever something out there is public about that person or that phrase. Okay. Google just announced recently that if you find something on their search engine that you don't like that's there about you or your kids, you can report it to them and they'll take it down. Okay, that removes it from the Google search engine. It does not remove it from the internet, right? You still have to go to the place that's actually hosting that content to have it fully removed from the internet. But it's good to know. There's a reason why we bring this up though, and it's this number. Okay, this is the number that we've been tracking for a while now. It's a research done by the Kaplan Institute. They started surveying college admissions officers in 2014, and they asked them, beyond the application, would you look students up online to find out more about them? And the first year they asked it, it was 25% said yes. And every year that number has continued to rise. The most recent number was this February, when 66% of them said, yeah, I would look them up. And for those of the ones who did look, 57% found something they did not like and convinced them that that's not the student for them. But 38% did find something that convinced them, you know what, this is the kind of person we want on our campus. So the reason we bring up the habit of looking yourself up and being alerted is very much for these reasons. That if in the future they have interest in potentially going to college, they really should, be careful of the number in red, but maybe take advantage of the number in green. And that's why encouraging good uses can be very beneficial to them for their future. Good uses are learning new skills, promoting a cause, or raising money for an organization they care about. There are apps that can showcase what they're good at, whether it's writing or they're an athlete or a performer. And even entering contests is a great way to encourage a kid to use the internet in positive ways. They might actually win the contest, but they can learn how to stick to a deadline and build a portfolio of entries into contests. So, really, this kind of brings us to the close of our session. What we want to encourage you to do, actually, especially for those of you with younger kids, we developed a new something called the Cyber Academy for Kids. A lot of the concepts we talked about tonight, especially around security and privacy, is available on our website. The URL is there on the page. And each one of these is a 2-minute video followed by a Kahoot quiz. And then there's a conversation guide for you as parents to have these conversations with them as they go through every module. So we'd love for you to give it a try, take what you learned tonight and talk about it with your kids. And this is our website that hosts a lot of resources about what we discussed this evening. Doug had actually referenced this before. Again, it's trendmicro.com/internet-safety.
Since we're on that topic, I know that we're recording this session, and there is a question in the Q&A asking how somebody who joined a little bit late, how they can re-watch this session.
Absolutely.
We don't actually post that on the website though, do we?
So what happens is we actually provide the link to the recording to the organizer at your school. So whoever at your school promoted this event to your school community is going to get a copy of the link to the recording. So you will get that. It's actually a private location on YouTube where it's posted. So yeah.
But we do have a lot of content that we've discussed on that site as she was explaining.
Absolutely. So stay active, stay in communication both with your kids and with other parents in your community. Stay up to date by following us, going to our website, and do us a favor. do one new thing that you had not done prior to tonight. Maybe turning on two-factor authentication on Roblox for your kids. Maybe update that password on the router, Doug, if you've
Yeah,
never updated it before. Maybe split your network and put the kids' devices on the guest network and your sensitive ones on the main network. Do
maybe
one,
turn on the digital well-being on your cell phone
yes,
and
yes,
have it dim the screen
yeah.
when it gets too late at night.
Or maybe just go ahead and give that TikTok a try. So we can go through the questions now if we need to, but for those of you, as you leave, please do fill out the survey. And if you joined us late and you didn't get a chance to sign in, I just posted in the chat the sign-in form. Just lets us know that you were here tonight, and we're able to report that to your school organizer. If you choose to sign in and put your email address, or you put your email address in the survey, you will automatically be entered to win a copy, one of 5 copies we're going to give out for Trend Micro Maximum Security. This is a security software to protect up to 5 devices in your home. That includes phones, by the way. Phones, laptops, desktops, tablets.
Since we're talking about contests, I know you already touched on it, but I just want to remind them, go out and check out the What's Your Story contest that we have on the same website. It can let kids earn some money for themselves and for school. So
Absolutely. We'll be launching our annual school video contest this fall. So again, follow us for more information on that. That'll be launching in the fall with the new school year. So your
Yep.
school could win up to $10,000. We've been awarding $10,000 to a school every year since 2010 in those contests.
let
So
me quickly circle back before we shut everything down on the kids chat apps and Discord as briefly as I can. First of all, I want to, if you got to consider what your needs are when it comes to chat apps. If you're just trying to communicate within your own family and everybody in your house has a cell phone, I just recommend using the basic text message, SMS messaging. It's designed to go across the cell phone network. It's probably the most regulated form of communication that you're going to be using by going that route. Okay. Which means that those messages aren't going to be held and redistributed and used for advertising by the service providers. So if you're just communicating back and forth, just basic text message is probably the right way to go. Encourage your kids to use that with their friends too. Less stuff is going to be held on servers in that manner if you're going that route. Now, if you're starting to use apps like Instagrams, like Snapchats, like Facebook Messenger, know that all of those services are owned by a for-profit company, and they're going to be collecting information about what is transmitted across those messages, whether it's just simple text, whether it's words that might lead to interests that they can then later use for targeted advertising. That stuff is tracked, it's monitored, and it can be used. That's what you agree to when you accept the terms of their use of their app. Sometimes those apps can also have followers that you may not be interested in allowing to be following you or your children. So be cautious about what's out there. Be cautious about who's following who they can follow, who they can communicate with. I know that a couple of simple, quick Google searches provided me some access to some tools that are out there that are specifically designed to allow kids to communicate amongst each other. Encourage that in your family, friends, and in circle of adults. Talk to other adults, see what they're using, what they're allowing their kids to use. Maybe get on the same page with them.
yeah.
But know that these chat apps are evolving and changing every few years. So what you tell them they can use today might change a year or two from now. So you got to stay on top of this as well. There is a kids messenger out there that I know is compatible with Facebook Messenger. And I think there's a way that you can manage who they're allowed to talk to through that particular app as well.
Yeah.
So you can approve certain Facebook interactions, Facebook Messenger interactions through that as well. Also know that a lot of these apps, like Discord, like Telegram, they can provide access to questionable content that's out there. Okay, whether it's intentional or accidental, know that the content is out there. Know that people are going to be trying to talk to your kids on some of these apps too. Just spend a little bit of time doing some research. Again, there's so many of them out there. I can't recommend any particular one. I can't deter you from using any particular one, but know that if it's provided by a privately owned company, it's going to traverse their network. They're going to have access to that data that's transmitted across the app, as well as any personally identifiable metadata that's associated with logging in and accessing the app. Where the cell phone exists in the world can even be tracked by those tools. So just do a little bit of research, and know that I personally think that a basic SMS or text message over the cell phone is the most secure, most regulated form of communication that you're going to find. You can always get third-party add-on messaging apps that use the same cell service, but those add some extra features like emojis and things like that. Some of those apps that you add on to the SMS and the text messenger, they will also collect data too. So just read through what they provide, what they collect, and use the privacy settings. And for the younger kids, take the upper hand and kind of focus on where the parental controls are, where the parental visibility is. Some of these things will allow any message that's sent across there to be shared back to you through some other parental portal sometimes as well. So just look for those types of tools.
Well, great. And thank you so much. So I think we've addressed the questions here that are in the Q&A. Fantastic. So again, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. And again, we'll make the recording link available to your school organizer. So please contact them if you want a copy of the recording. We want to thank everybody from all the different schools. We got mostly the West Coast represented tonight, which is great. But from Boston, signing off, and from Austin, just north of us, Austin and Boston, right? I will say tomorrow is World Password Day, so make sure you change passwords. Celebrate World Password Day tomorrow. It's also Cinco de Mayo, but it's also World Password Day. Change your passwords.
Minimum of 8 characters, recommended 12.
Yes. Thank you, Marcella, for being on with us tonight. And good night, everyone.